Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat.
I have to tell you something. What? Very quickly. I didn't know the Prime Minister was coming.
Well, first of all,
PMO's office when he was a child.
thank you very much. You were really good with the coffee, so we're still on time, which is... Thank you. Okay. Next, before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to a video from National Geographic to inspire us. And please, listen to the video. Thanks to Nat Geo. Our next speaker was my neighbor a long time ago. To introduce him, I would like to ask Catherine McKenna, please, to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Merci Jean et merci Nat Geo. C'est un vidéo tellement inspirant. I feel really proud to be Canadian when I see that video. And I think about how important it is that we're all coming together today in Montreal. There's someone who knows better than anyone how important it is to protect our nature. It's someone who I've had the chance to work extremely closely with, who has always pushed me, who's always had my back, and who's always understood that this is protecting nature. It's not just for us, it's for future generations. C'est le Premier ministre du Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. He appointed me the first ever Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Alors, la première ministre de l'Environnement et des Changements Climatiques au Canada, and that was really important because he wanted to make a point that we needed to link the environment and climate change. When he did it, I almost fell off my chair. And then he told me that I was off to COP21 because Canada had to be pushing for ambition. Then I actually had to ask someone, what's a COP? So Conference of the Parties, and then I immediately banned acronyms. But he was there. He was there for the Paris Agreement. He has been there since. He's someone, though, who also just understands the value of nature. I'm an avid canoeist, but I will tell you, he can beat me in a canoe. That's for sure. And he's always linked the agendas. He understands that it's not just about climate change, it's not just about nature, it's not just about oceans, that it's really what we value, what we love, and that in Canada we have an extra special responsibility to protect it. I'll give you one story before he comes on. We went to Rouge National Urban Park, Canada's first national urban park. We managed to expand it. It was a great day. It's an amazing place. 7 million people have access to it by public transportation. We worked with the Indigenous peoples to do this, also farmers, environmentalists, bringing folks together. And we were out in a canoe. And I was in my canoe. I had my daughter, and I look over, the Prime Minister's in the canoe with his wife, Madame Sophie Guilbeault Trudeau. And I look in the backdrop, and I see his security guys. And I was like, wait, why are they going in circles in the canoe? And I realized, and I love our security guys, but they were not canoeists. And I thought, okay, this is going to be really, really awkward. And I was thinking, okay, if I have to save them, okay, they're pretty big, how am I going to do this? And I looked over to the Prime Minister, and he wasn't very proud. And he had a twinkle in his eye. And I know he was saying, I've got this. So without further ado, an avid canoeist, committed guardian of nature, someone who understands in the 21st century the environment and the economy have to go together, Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Merci tout le monde. Bonjour. Merci Catherine pour cette belle introduction et merci pour tout ton travail. La ministre McKenna est une leader incroyable dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques et la protection de la nature et on est tous chanceux de l'avoir avec nous aujourd'hui. Je veux également remercier tous ceux et celles qui sont ici aujourd'hui pour le sommet des champions de la nature. En tant que Montréalais, c'est toujours un grand plaisir d'accueillir le monde chez moi, surtout quand c'est pour parler d'un sujet qui me passionne. Il y a quelques semaines, l'astronaute canadien David Saint-Jacques a effectué sa première sortie dans l'espace. Il a partagé avec nous des images incroyables de la Terre où on peut admirer notre planète bleue qui flotte dans le néant. Ce sont des images profondément touchantes qui nous rappellent pourquoi on est ici aujourd'hui. Des images qui nous rappellent ce qui est en jeu. On a juste une planète. Et donc, lorsqu'on parle de ce que l'avenir nous réserve, on ne parle pas seulement d'un bout de terrain ou d'un seul fleuve. On parle de l'avenir de notre terre et de ses habitants. Vous savez, j'ai 3 enfants et je pense souvent au monde que je vais leur laisser. Lorsqu'ils seront plus vieux, je veux qu'ils puissent descendre la rivière Nahanni en canot ou faire de la randonnée en forêt au parc Algonquin. But plastic is showing up in our lakes that used to be pristine. Natural habitats are disappearing, and wildlife populations are half of what they were in the 1970s. We can't afford to ignore these realities. We can't wait for other people or other generations to do something about it. It's up to Canada to act. With a quarter of the globe's boreal forests and the longest coastline in the world, this is a fight that Canada has to lead. Because Canadians are already seeing the costs. Farmers' crops are being destroyed by droughts. Every summer, wildfires threaten people's businesses, and homes are getting washed out by floods, something that families here in Quebec and across Eastern Canada faced just this past weekend. Hier, j'ai visité un centre d'évacuation à Gatineau où j'ai rencontré des gens qui ont travaillé fort toute la fin de semaine pour aider les familles dans le besoin. Ils veillent à ce que les sinistrés aient un repas chaud et un endroit pour dormir le temps que les choses se calment. Je veux d'ailleurs prendre un moment pour remercier les bénévoles et les nombreux voisins qui se sont mobilisés pour appuyer ceux dont la vie vient de basculer. Cela dit, il faut être réaliste par rapport à la situation. Si on ne réalise pas des progrès concrets au chapitre de l'environnement, la situation à laquelle on fait face présentement va devenir notre nouvelle réalité. Plus de gens seront forcés d'évacuer. Plus de maisons seront détruites par des phénomènes météorologiques extrêmes. Je n'ai pas besoin de vous dire que nous sommes la dernière génération à pouvoir agir pour le climat et la biodiversité. Ce sont deux sujets intimement liés. On ne peut pas parler de l'un sans l'autre. Les changements climatiques menacent la nature comme ils menacent nos maisons et notre mode de vie. Et lorsqu'on détruit nos espaces naturels, tout ça s'accélère. C'est bien quelque chose que notre gouvernement comprend très bien. Pendant que des partis de l'opposition nient l'existence même des changements climatiques, pendant que certaines provinces gaspillent des millions de l'argent des contribuables pour se battre contre les mesures pour le climat devant les tribunaux, notre gouvernement donne suite à ses engagements. Canada is warming at nearly twice the global rate, and even faster in our north. But the opposition denies that climate change is real, and look no further than Ontario to find a provincial government that's wasting taxpayers' money fighting climate action in court while ignoring their commitments to protect species at risk. It's short-sighted and irresponsible, and frankly, Canadians deserve better. That's why, after a decade of inaction under the previous government, our government committed to making real progress to protect and preserve nature across Canada. L'année dernière, notre gouvernement a annoncé le plus gros investissement dans les efforts de la conservation de la nature de l'histoire du Canada. On parle de plus de 1,3 milliard de dollars pour protéger les espaces naturels qui sont au cœur de notre identité canadienne. Mais ce n'est pas tout. Notre plan national de protection des océans vise à améliorer la conservation des océans, le transport maritime responsable et la sécurité maritime. Et d'ailleurs, le ministre Wilkinson a annoncé plus tôt aujourd'hui que le chenal laurentien sera maintenant une zone maritime protégée. Lorsqu'on est arrivé au pouvoir, moins de 1% des océans canadiens étaient protégés. Aujourd'hui, ce pourcentage s'élève à plus de 8%. Ce sont des progrès considérables qui nous rapprochent de nos objectifs en matière de conservation, et tout ça en moins de 4 ans. We're protecting nature in our cities, too, like the Rouge Park in the Greater Toronto Area. This is Canada's first ever national urban park, and the largest in North America. My friends, we're on the right track, but we know that there is so much more to be done. Our government is working with Inuit leaders and the government of Nunavut on a marine conservation area in the high Arctic basin, and we're moving forward in creating Thaidene National Park Reserve. There's no doubt that we're making progress, but we can't do this work alone. Le sommet d'aujourd'hui donne le ton avant la réunion des ministres de l'Environnement du G7 et la conférence des parties à la Convention sur la diversité biologique qui aura lieu l'année prochaine. Ce sera l'occasion pour les pays du monde de se fixer des objectifs concrets pour les 10 prochaines années. La lutte contre les changements climatiques doit absolument être menée à l'échelle mondiale, puisque les conséquences du réchauffement planétaire ne connaissent pas de frontières. Les pays qui partagent une vision semblable du monde sont appelés à travailler ensemble au sein des forums internationaux comme le G7 et les Nations unies, mais l'élaboration de solutions concrètes n'est pas seulement l'affaire de gouvernements. Les entreprises et les organisations à but non lucratif doivent également participer à la lutte contre les changements climatiques. De la même façon, les communautés autochtones doivent être des partenaires à part entière. On doit protéger la nature tout en avançant sur le chemin de la réconciliation. Prenez par exemple la première aire protégée autochtone au Canada, l'aire Édésé, dans les territoires du Nord-Ouest, qui a été créée grâce au leadership des Premières Nations du Decho. C'est la preuve qu'en travaillant ensemble, on peut accomplir beaucoup de choses. Notre gouvernement agit pour assurer le respect des droits et des responsabilités des communautés qui sont les gardiennes des terres traditionnelles, des eaux et des glaces. Quand les gens qui œuvrent dans les domaines différents, entrepreneurs, philanthropes, leaders autochtones et j'en passe, s'unissent autour d'un objectif commun et partagent leur savoir-faire, on trouve des vraies solutions. It's not enough to just have scientists and nature conservationists talking to each other about how to protect our water, air, and land. Real change happens when this is something that everyone is thinking about, whether it's folks picking up their kids from school or people waiting in line at the grocery store. Every single person can and must be a part of the solution. Protecting nature and tackling climate change is the challenge of our generation. And people like the kids from St. Aloysius School in Kitchener are counting on us to lead. Last month, they wrote me about the importance of fighting climate change and investing in solutions like renewable energy. Glenn, in grade 7, says, if we don't do something soon, it could get worse and worse and worse, and this is why we should save the Earth's power. You gotta think about it. Kyle ends his letter by asking me, do you want your children to live in a world full of pollution, or should they continue the path of evolution? And Bella says, I'm sorry to put all the pressure on you, but if you can, could you share this with the UN? It would save everyone if you do. My friends, it's not just Glenn, Kyle, and Bella who are relying on us. It's everyone of every age, from young people halfway around the globe to farmers right here at home. Our government is ready to keep leading, and I know you are too. Thank you so much for joining us today. Merci.
Alors, un grand merci au Premier ministre. C'est un grand champion de la nature. Moi, je suis très fière de servir sur l'équipe avec tout ce qu'on fait pour avancer nos attaques au changement climatique, mais aussi pour protéger la nature. Je vais aussi introduire maintenant un grand environnementaliste, quelqu'un qui est vraiment un champion pour les changements climatiques, pour la nature. C'est M. Steven Guilbeault. Steven Guilbeault a fondé l'organisme Équiterre, très bien connu au Québec, mais aussi très bien connu autour du monde. Mr. Guilbeault, Steven Guilbeault, is incredibly well known. He's someone who is a leading environmentalist who's been working for generations. He has also been called one of the world's top 50 players in sustainable development. And now he's serving in a very special role to help advise our government on climate action, looking at how do we accelerate action? How do we do better in the transportation sector, how we get around, and how we build buildings? But also, how do we leverage the resources, including from the private sector, to move to a lower carbon economy and also ensure that everyone is part of it? So thank you, Steven Guilbeault. I'm looking forward to have you conversation with the Prime Minister. There he is, Steven Guilbeault. Merci.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Prime Minister, thank you for being with us. For many people in Canada, and Catherine and others have talked about how this is something that this is very entrenched in you. It's not something that you started paying attention to when you were elected to Parliament, but not everybody knows that. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about where this passion for nature protection comes from.
It comes from, like so many Canadians growing up, in a country where going and playing outside was fundamental to our daily lives, it seemed. I mean, I reflect a lot on what being an environmentalist means these days as opposed to what it meant a generation ago or more. I mean, if you want to think about the environment today, we spend a lot of time focusing on climate change, but in the past, focusing on the environment meant creating national parks, and my dad did a lot of that, and because of that I got to travel around to so many incredible places, from the Parc de la Mauricie to Wilberforce Falls to camping and canoeing in Algonquin Park and elsewhere. And this summer we're sending our kids off to camp for the first time, and canoe camp for the first time, our 10 and 11-year-olds. And it was absolutely shocking to me to realize that now, I mean, as for many of us when we were kids, paddling, if you were thirsty, you'd take your cup, you'd dip it into one of the lakes in Algonquin Park, and you just drink from it, and that was it. And you can't camp pretty much anywhere in Canada anymore where you're not packing your trusty MEC filter. It's just part of the way things are done, and for me, that's something that we've lost and that my kids have lost in not simply being able to take for granted that the country with the largest reserves of fresh water in the world, you can't actually drink much of that fresh water straight when you're out there in nature and trying to connect with the world. And that, for me, is a real loss. And as much as we are continuing to focus on climate change, I'm really excited about the fact that we get to talk about nature writ large. We get to talk about those extraordinary places. I see Harvey Locke here, and we were involved in 2003, when I was getting my start as a public advocate on many things, as an environmentalist, in the campaign to protect the Nahanni National Park Reserve, which was expanded from basically a river protection that had been done 40 years ago to now protecting almost the entire watershed. And that kind of engagement is something that I've been involved in all my life and are going to continue to. And that's why our reaching of our targets of 10% of marine protected and 17% of land protected by next year is something that has been so important to this government, and why we're going to continue to do it.
And thanks to those national parks, my wife and I were able to do our honeymoon in one of those national parks in Mingan Island, kayaking just a few years ago. You just touched on that, but before you got into politics, you were an environmental activist. Like, you were involved in some of the issues we're talking about, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that as well.
Well, I mean, my background, as my political opponents certainly like to emphasize, was as a snowboard instructor and a mountain guide and a whitewater river guide and a camp counselor, which was said with sort of dripping venom in attack ads.
All roads lead to Rome.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I have a whole thing about the leadership skills that you develop at 17 years old trying to handle a group of 12-year-olds, but in nature. But like, my path has always kept me outside and across this country and engaged in so many different ways, and it led me to a deep appreciation. And one of the early organizations I got involved, I was involved in avalanche safety and avalanche awareness after my brother's death in an avalanche in Kokanee Provincial Park. in BC, but I also got involved through a dear old friend of my father's and a mentor of mine, Jim Coots, in the Nature Conservancy of Canada. I got involved in deepening my appreciation when I went back to school in my early 30s to do a master's degree in environmental geography right here at the McGill School of the Environment. So there was a number of, I didn't quite finish my thesis because I got distracted and headed into politics, but the opportunity to really dig into what I felt was the biggest issue of the time, which for me involves, yes, protecting nature and protecting our environment, but it actually mostly involves a fundamental shift away from the short-term thinking that has led us to the kinds of success we've had as a civilization. I mean, we have a set of instincts and actions that have driven us towards this success because as communities, as individuals, we've been able to say, okay, if we focus on the short term and the narrow around us, the big picture will take care of itself. And of course, for the almost all of human history on this planet, 200,000 years, that's been the case, that if we focused on our short term and our narrow, we could be fine. But we've suddenly found ourselves over the past 200 years, 50 years, depending on how you calculate it, in a moment where we cannot just focus on the short term. Even though all our instincts tell us we can focus on the short term and be successful, we now have to change our way of thinking to think about the breadth and the depth of the impact of every single action. And that is a transformation of everything, from individual consumer choices to business decisions, to political leadership and political decisions, to everything we do. We're now having to take into account something that we never had to worry about before. And that's why it's so hard to get people to shift into that thinking. So the leadership of people in this room, people who understand that shift towards a long-term thinking actually means an understanding and respect of the natural world that underlies and supports everything else we do, from every business to every community to anything, any sort of human activity on this planet is built on layers of ecosystem services or natural processes that we take for granted that we can no longer take for granted. And it's that shift that is most important, I think, to me, and that's certainly what I spent a lot of time reflecting on before getting into politics.
Merci. Plusieurs personnes depuis hier ont parlé de l'investissement historique que vous avez fait dans le cadre du budget de 2018 et j'aurais deux questions suite à ça. L'une des particularités, c'est que l'argent du gouvernement fédéral doit servir à aller chercher de l'argent de d'autres types d'organisations, secteur privé, organisations internationales, fondations. Et est-ce que, et c'est ma première question, est-ce que c'est pour vous l'un des éléments pour la suite des choses? Est-ce que c'est comme ça qu'on arrive à faire preuve de plus d'ambition? Et l'autre chose, je discutais avec plusieurs des fonctionnaires d'Environnement Canada hier soir qui me disaient que finalement, il y a 10 fois plus de projets qu'il y a d'argent disponible. Alors, j'en ai pas parlé à votre ministre des Finances encore, mais est-ce que dans l'avenir, on pourrait imaginer que le Canada continue d'investir de cette façon-là?
D'abord, effectivement, dans notre budget, on a mis 1,3 milliard de dollars dans la conservation de la nature et spécifiquement un demi-milliard pour des investissements qui vont être matchés par des philanthropes, par d'autres organismes, d'autres niveaux de gouvernement. Parce qu'on reconnaît que les gouvernements ne peuvent pas être les seuls à agir. Pas seulement parce qu'on n'a pas les capacités de tout changer en tant que gouvernement, mais aussi parce que les choix des individus sont importants pour transformer notre façon de fonctionner. Et le pouvoir des entreprises, des philanthropes, des consommateurs, des autres paliers de gouvernement, des autres gouvernements dans le monde sont essentiels. Et ce leadership d'indiquer qu'on est là pour être partenaire, mais qu'on reconnaît que c'est le partenariat qui est essentiel à cette transformation, c'est à la base de tout. Et par rapport à ta deuxième question, est-ce qu'on va en faire plus? Bien sûr, on va en faire plus. Mais l'affaire, c'est que je crois profondément que le plus qu'on fait, le plus les gens commencent à comprendre que c'est payant d'investir dans la nature, que ça nous profite tous, que c'est pas juste un don qu'on fait sans avoir de retour, mais que des stratégies responsables et des approches économiquement bien financées pour protéger nos terres et nos océans nous amènent à des bénéfices économiques tangibles et concrets pour le moyen terme, le long terme, et souvent dans le court terme aussi. Et c'est cette compréhension que c'est des investissements qu'on est en train de faire dans notre monde et pas juste des dépenses. C'est exactement ce qu'on va continuer à faire.
Et jusqu'à maintenant, comment trouvez-vous que la collaboration... Est-ce que la collaboration est bonne avec notamment, on pense aux provinces, les organisations? Est-ce que la réponse est bonne, clairement, selon vos fonctionnaires? Oui. Mais comment est-ce que vous voyez ça pour la suite des choses?
Bien, ça dépend. Mais je pense qu'il y a... Même s'il y a beaucoup de débats encore, malheureusement, au niveau des changements climatiques et si on devrait agir ou non dans la sphère politique, il y a un peu moins de débats sur la conservation. On voit que même des partis plus à droite sont très ouverts à l'idée de protéger des aires vulnérables, à protéger un territoire important. And that shift of actually seeing that there is more of a political consensus around protection of vulnerable species and vulnerable areas is a very positive thing. Of course, one of the things that you always have to reflect on is, if you're protecting this particular area, that's great that you're protecting that area, but what are you suddenly saying about everything else that is surrounded and therefore not protected? So you can't just go around, making a national park here and say, well, that's what my contribution is. You have to think about what we're doing in other places as well. And that's why in our reflection on protecting areas and working with provinces and municipalities and businesses and investors, recognizing, yes, there are places that we need to protect and there can be no drilling, no resource extraction, no development because this is a particularly vulnerable or important place. But you also have to think about other places, how you manage intelligently and get the balance between economic benefits and sustainable long-term future. I mean, so much of the Earth's population relies on proteins from the ocean, relies on fish, that we have been drawing from our oceans as an economic benefit for so long that we need to start thinking about how we invest to be able to make sure that those resources are around for the long term. And that is fundamentally not just a moral argument, because for many of us a moral argument is enough, but in far too many cases in the world we have to also make an economic argument. But that economic argument is better and better able to be made. The challenge we face right now, I think, is one of almost a form of nihilism, where people are saying, you know what, we're all in trouble, we're all screwed, the planet's going in exactly the wrong direction, let's just, try and survive through the short term and leave the next generation to deal with whatever, because it's not going to last anyway. I think we know that we have the capacity, and obviously the Earth has the capacity to renew and to get back to a place of health. But we have to start doing it now in real and tangible ways. And that's where the partnerships are so important. That's where the vision is so important. And that's where a positive attitude, I mean, the environmental movement has always been torn between a doom and gloom, the world is ending unless you do this, unless you change that, and this idea of optimism that we actually have the capacity to make changes that are going to make a difference. And I think we are definitely seeing positive stories of things that we've done, even amongst the terrible news we see around extinction events and impacts of climate change around the world, that there is a real tangible role that we can have individually and collectively as positive agents of protecting our planet and protecting ourselves and mostly our future generations.
So do you feel perhaps, I mean, clearly in North America, not just in North America, but clearly right now, climate is a very polarized issue, unfortunately, and certainly in Canada. Do you feel perhaps that nature could be a way where we could bridge that gap between, because I think many people would agree with you that there's less tension around conservation, certainly in North America, than there is on climate. So perhaps, could nature be a bridge towards more action on climate change?
Well, I think it has to be. I mean, last year Canada hosted and was president of the G7 meeting of most industrialized nations. And of course, because we were Canada and because it's me, we were going to make sure that environmental protection was a really big part of the discussion we had. However, when you think about the folks around the table, particularly our neighbor immediately to the south, there was going to be challenge that we saw in attaining consensus around bold action on climate change at the G7 leaders level, and we really wanted to make sure that we were united as an organization showing real leadership. So we said, okay, if we don't want to spend too much time arguing over climate change, as much as that pains me, is there something else we can do that will be a real positive and tangible focus on G7 leadership? And we said, okay, let's talk about the oceans. Let's talk about plastics in the oceans. Let's talk about how we're going to help small island developing states develop better resilience, both in their oceans, but also in the extreme weather events that are hitting them more often. How can we focus on oceans as a theme where we can get consensus, and specifically plastics in the ocean? That was something that we were able to use to significantly advance the conversation in a really important way. But I think we've only, as a global community, only started to appreciate that it's not just about separate subjects we can deal with, but they are all deeply interwoven. I mean, when we look at a country, as a country, on things like, okay, where do we need to protect a given area? Where should we build this next national park? Where should we create more marine protected areas? A lot of our reflections are, well, what kind of biodiversity is there? What kind of species at risk live there? What kind of, how is this place particularly unique and therefore required to be protected from human activity or development? And that's still going to be very important reflections. But I'm excited about the fact that over the past year or so, we've started to have conversations on more than just why is this unique and needs to be protected, but why is this a useful area as a carbon sink, as a way to protect and to fight against climate change? And looking at particularly the boreal forest, for example, as being a place that is extraordinarily important as a sink, as a generator of oxygen. These are the kinds of things that we have to start thinking about, how protecting our waters, protecting our land, and fighting climate change can and will go together. And I don't think we've properly explored, either scientifically or politically, all the levers that we actually have where we can develop more impact in fighting climate change. And I think the more people can understand the fact that all these different subjects are all interconnected and connected to you as a consumer, as an individual, as a citizen in so many different ways, that we have just one planet and we have to take all these different approaches and angles in terms of how we protect it and make it smart and make it reasonable and make it connected to people in the things that they are passionate about, whether it's their kids' future, whether it's innovative technologies, whether it's beautiful places and hiking or traveling through them, whether it's just appreciating it. I mean, there are ways to awaken a sense of responsibility in every single individual on this planet. And we have to try and figure out how to connect all those in to the different themes we have to work on.
Thank you. We've talked a lot about how do we break the silos. And it's true internationally as it is domestically. We have an international convention on climate change. We have one on biodiversity, desertification, and we have a Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and a very good minister at that, and a very good minister of Fisheries. But how can we do that from a public policy perspective, from a governmental perspective? We we do it?
Well, I mean, one of the challenges we had as a government coming in almost 4 years ago was that government really naturally does separate itself into silos, like so many organizations or like so many people, where you have, the environment was doing one thing, and then, Department of Industry was doing something else completely at loggerheads, and the Minister of Natural Resources and the Minister of the Environment traditionally never got along in any government, and we discovered so many different blockages that weren't just at the upper levels, but trickled down through the whole public service, where people were focusing on their responsibilities, and it's my job to get our exporting of minerals up and develop new opportunities, and I'll let someone else worry about the environment, and in conversations between each other we'll figure out what the right path is. Well, we're much more trying to shift towards a holistic approach, or a whole of government approach, where protecting the environment is every single department's responsibility, not just the Department of the Environment. I mean, there's a theory out there that there shouldn't be a Minister of the Environment. I don't think we're ready for that. Don't worry, Catherine. But that every department, every ministry, everyone would be responsible for protecting the environment within what they do. And that idea of being more holistic and whole of government in that approach applies to so many things, not just the environment. It applies to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. It can't just be about the ministries that have titular responsibilities for that relationship. It has to be broader, and natural resources, and labor and skills development, and everyone needs to be able to feed in to all these different subjects. And that's where government by cabinet, where we actually make decisions with everyone around the table, not just a select few, where making sure that the approach and accountability through the public service connects as well is really important. But then, of course, you get to the international area where people have different agendas. They get elected, or even within Canada, you have people who are committed to fighting climate change getting voted in by people who are indifferent to the fight against climate change being voted in at the same time at different orders of government. And how you work together that way is a bit of a challenge. How we work with neighbors in other countries around the world that have very different imperatives, different levels of development, different opportunities, different responsibilities, different levels of wealth. Getting everyone onto the same page and understanding that this is something that we all need to do together is the big challenge of our time. And gatherings like this one, and specifically the gathering that this is leading into next year at the Conference of the Parties in China, is going to be essential for making that real action happen at a time where, of course, we all think that the time we are living in and acting in and leading in is the most pivotal time in the history of the world. But I think there's a real argument to be made that right now, with the transformation that our world is going through, with the pace of change, with the technological developments, with globalization, the decisions we make now will really impact irrevocably the course of our species over the next few decades. And that is why this moment where we gather together to stand up, stand together, and take action is so important.
On voit depuis quelques décennies une prise de conscience planétaire des enjeux à la fois climatiques, des enjeux de nature, de conservation, les océans, le plastique. De façon un peu peut-être paradoxale, on voit aussi beaucoup de gens qui ont l'impression qu'on n'y arrivera pas. Les jeunes sont dans la rue et parfois je me demande si en fait on n'a pas un peu mal servi nos intérêts. Les gens sont très préoccupés par l'environnement maintenant et ils veulent de l'action maintenant. Or, changer l'économie mondiale, on ne peut pas faire ça en criant ciseaux. Donc, comment est-ce qu'on réconcilie, comment est-ce qu'on dit à ces centaines de milliers de jeunes qui étaient dans la rue il y a à peine un mois, un peu partout sur la planète, et qui le sont encore parfois, comment est-ce qu'on leur fait comprendre qu'on avance dans la bonne direction, mais qu'il reste beaucoup de travail à faire et qu'on a besoin d'eux?
Écoute, je comprends profondément l'impatience des gens qui savent qu'on commence à manquer de temps. pour changer notre trajectoire en tant que civilisation, en tant que société, commence à manquer de temps pour protéger la planète des 2 degrés ou des 1,5 degrés qui seraient catastrophiques. Alors, je comprends tout à fait et je sympathise énormément avec cette préoccupation, mais un des gros problèmes qu'on a eu, c'est que les citoyens sont toujours très prêts à dire qu'ils veulent voir l'environnement protégé. Si tu parles à quelqu'un, un jeune, un moins jeune, oui, la protection de l'environnement, c'est important. Mais ensuite, tu creuses un peu plus et tu dis, OK, qu'est-ce que tu es prêt à abandonner pour protéger l'environnement? Quel genre de changement tu es prêt à faire dans ta vie pour payer plus cher pour protéger l'environnement? Pour moins faire de dommages à l'environnement. Et là, les gens passent très rapidement à être moins enthousiastes par rapport à ces actions-là. Et on l'a souvent vu. Moi, mes premières élections au Canada, c'était sur le fameux tournant vert, the Green Shift election in Canada, where there was a price on pollution proposed that was going to move us in the right direction. And it got rejected for many different reasons, some political and others. But that idea of demonstrating tangibly that we can move forward in a responsible, sustainable way, in a way that doesn't put significant extra burdens on ordinary citizens. And that's the nut that has been so important to try and crack in governments around the world. Because we get governments who try and do the right thing, are well-meaning, and are taking real leadership on climate change, only to be defeated in a populist wave that is so prevalent around the world right now. And getting that balance right, I mean, on a personal level, whenever I show up at any event around the country these days, and I hear there are protesters outside, I have to ask them, okay, are they protesting because I'm doing too much on the environment, or are they protesting because I'm doing not enough on the environment? And sometimes I get groups doing the same things. And it's not to sort of say that the Goldilocks answer is the right answer, but it is to say that politically, if we're going to be able to continue to move forward, we have to figure out ways of doing enough to get us on the right path, while at the same time not doing so much that people decide that their jobs and putting food on the table and their kids' future in the short term is more important. And the voices on either side, actually for me, are extremely important and extremely helpful. It's helpful for me to be able to point out the opposite side of the argument when we're putting forward something that goes too far for some and not far enough for others. But I truly believe that we are in a moment where we can demonstrate that moving forward on protecting our environment, protecting more of nature, protecting more of our oceans, fighting against climate change, is not just not going to be an economic cost. I think it's becoming increasingly clear for everyone that you cannot have a plan for the future of our economy as a country, as a nation, if you don't also have a plan for environmental sustainability and environmental protection. And I am the last person to say that we've got that balance exactly right. We're constantly working on trying to figure out new ways of doing this and doing that, and conferences like these are incredibly important to develop tools for governments like ours, but others around the world, to move forward in the right way. But leadership is about, yes, drawing people along, but not getting so far out in front that suddenly you're alone with no parade behind you. but it's also not staying in the middle of the group, milling around because you've got no forward momentum and no direction there. So it's getting that balance right of saying this matters for now, this matters for tomorrow, this matters for future generations, and we can do things about it, and we can make it affordable for regular people. And getting that right is the key what we need to do.
One thing Canada did recently that was very interesting, and I'm wondering if there isn't something, Minister Wilkinson earlier was talking about how sometimes when you want to protect a certain area, workers from fisheries sector or the forestry sector will have a knee-jerk reaction. They'll feel that their jobs are at risk. And as part of our climate change plan, we have a target in Canada to eliminate coal electricity production by 2030. And one of the very interesting things you guys did is to put together this working group that...
Just transition.
Yeah, just transition for workers and communities. So it wasn't just... And I read the report, and they went through those communities in Saskatchewan and New Brunswick and other places to talk with these people and say, okay, well, this is where we're going, and we want you to be part of this. And sometimes I'm wondering if we don't need a working group on just transition on oil and on forestry, because many of these sectors are and will be impacted by some of the transformation we're seeing.
No, there's no question about it. I mean, we committed to phase out coal-fired electricity generation by 2030 right across the country. We've already gone a long way towards that. But how you reassure people who are either in the industry or in communities reliant on thermal coal to feel comfortable about what they're going to do in the future, what their kids are going to do in the future. And that, quite frankly, one of the messages and the really comforting things that shouldn't have been surprising, but it was a bit surprising, was that the conversations with these communities that would be affected by phasing out coal were actually very, very positive. People understand where the world is going. They are just feeling real anxiety right now. I mean, take the situation in Alberta, where the oil and gas sector has been struggling tremendously over the past few years because of low prices, because our oil resources are prisoners to a single market in the United States. And the anxiety that people feel there is real. Now, it doesn't mean that Albertans do not care deeply about the environment, about the opportunities for their kids and their future generations. And even though there's a lot of fear and a lot of anger, we need to do a better job of reassuring them that the future has not just a place for them, but has a deep need for the innovative, forward-thinking, hard-working, and clear-minded approach that Albertans have always had on building a brighter future. And as you start to include people and empower them to be part of these conversations, involve the fishing community in sustainable harvesting, involve the forestry workers in what is sustainable forestry, involve mining workers and mineral communities in how we move forward, and empower them instead of making them feel subject to global forces that are taking away their living while the global forces figure out how to make billions of dollars in a new area. It's that idea that the world is moving on and leaving me behind in this challenged little backwards-looking pocket. It's no, make sure that I feel that for me and my family, even though the world is changing, you're thinking about, as leaders, as politicians, as business people, you're thinking about my place in this world and how I'm going to continue to be able to feed my family, contribute to my community, and grow my country. That is, I think, the thing that is missing an awful lot from some of the environmental rhetoric, certainly some of the political rhetoric, some of the technological rhetoric, as robots replace or automation replaces assembly line jobs. What are we saying to those folks and those communities that are seeing the changes going on around us and really anxious about the future. And that's what we come down to. One of the challenges around politics these days is that populism has easy answers for those people. Let's work backwards and make things great again the way they used to be. Well, that actually isn't a real solution. You're playing King Canute, holding back the tide. Well, you can't do that. Instead, what we're trying to do in Canada, and it works on a technological basis with AI, but it also very much works in our natural resource economy, where you reassure people that we are helping to shape the future in a way that is going to benefit them, that they are an essential part of building that better track forward, and that they will continue to have good jobs and good livelihoods as we evolve and transform our economies in different ways. And it's that message of, this is going to be tough, but we can be optimistic and forward thinking about it, that is essential as a political message. And it contrasts with the fear-based message or blaming message that we have. But again, because the environment touches us all, it's hard to make an argument to fishers that they need to cut down on their catch when a Russian trawler comes through and scrapes up everything, even though they're trying to resist everything. So there is a need for global leadership that isn't there yet, but I'm seeing, especially through leadership of organizations and communities like this one gathered right here, that there is a time and there is an approaching accountability that is going to make it fairer for everyone, that the early adopters and the leaders on this won't be punished for being Boy Scouts when the rest of the world is racing as fast as they can towards making a quick buck and leaving the problem for next generations. That's the challenge of leadership that we all wield right now, and that's something that Canada is certainly going to be a key part of.
Thank you very much. Well, I suspect you and I could continue doing that for some time, but I'm told we have a country to run, so thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Pour remercier officiellement nos deux invités, j'inviterai le ministre Wilkinson to thank our speakers. Please welcome ministers from Fisheries and Ocean and Coast Guard Canada. Jonathan Wilkinson.
It's my great pleasure just to say a very simple thank you to our speakers today. Certainly, I think, Prime Minister, your presence here underlines the commitment that Canada is making to address a number of the issues that have been under discussion here today and will be under discussion later today. Both domestically, in terms of getting our own house in order and doing the things that we need to do to ensure we're fighting climate change and addressing biodiversity loss, but also to step forward on an international basis to be part of a broader coalition to champion these issues. And I think that many of you, all of you in the room today, are also stepping forward by being here. Countries like Chile and Uganda and Norway and a range of other countries, leaders of environmental organizations, of international organizations, indigenous leaders, are here because you are saying that you are willing to step forward and be part of leading this fight on a global basis that is so urgent. So thank you for being here, Prime Minister, and spending the time with us and underlining the importance that we in Canada ascribe to these issues. Et merci, Steven Guilbeault. C'est très important le travail que vous avez fait. Et c'est très important et très inspirant. Et merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's time for the group picture. So we'll have